All right, thanks for watching this video. I'm putting this together as I put together this podcast series on the conflict between Ethiopia and Fascist Italy, and I will do my best to make sure it is worth your while. And in this video, what I want to focus on is the Walwal skirmish, and this is what basically this is the spark that ignites a conflict. And as the thesis of the series goes, this conflict is the spark that ignites World War II. So I brought up this map to give you some context. And you'll see here we're in the Horn of Africa. We have Ethiopia here, and we have what is now Somalia, but at the time is split between British Somaliland and Italian Somaliland. We're in December 1934. Now, for some time, the Italians have been making incursions into the region and essentially kind of itching for a fight. They're kind of looking to instigate. There are these Italian-backed militias that are bands of native soldiers commanded by an Italian officer. And in the region, as you can see here, you got British Somaliland and Ethiopia. There was an Anglo-Ethiopian commission that was doing some work demarcating the border to clarify where it stands. And in that work, they come to Walwal, which is basically a watering hole, and they find quite a few Italian troops there, about a couple hundred. And this Italian-backed militia was kind of making incursions and denying access to wells, which this is an arid, dry desert area, and so people live around watering holes. And so these militia were basically taking these wells, denying access, and essentially kind of instigating, provoking a fight. So this has been going on for a while. The emperor knows about it, and when there's a standoff. There are Italian-backed troops, there are Ethiopian troops, and then there are some border commissioners from who are British. And the Italians kind of are very provocative, very aggressive. They threaten the British and the Ethiopians. The Ethiopians try to tell them to go pound sand. And the emperor eventually decides enough is enough, and he sends several thousand troops down from up here in Harar and Duradawa, a little bit to the north, and he sends them down to confront them. And so there's a bit of a standoff, a tense standoff. They're trying to resolve the issue over a few beers in a hot tent, but at some point the fighting breaks out, and it's not clear who fires first. But there were reports that there was a whistle and then a couple of Italian phrases, atera and fuoco. Well, whoever started it, the fighting begins, and the Ethiopians are kind of in a bad tactical position. The Italians have more troops there. They have armored vehicles. They have airplanes buzzing the site. And by the time the fighting is done, there are over 100 Ethiopians killed, 45 wounded. On the Italian side, 30 dead, 1 wounded, none of whom are white soldiers. But news traveled slow. The Italians have radio in their Ogaden, but the Ethiopians didn't. And so a messenger has to take the message back to Ethiopia, to Addis Ababa, and inform the emperor. He knows about the confrontation, and as they put together a response to the Italians, he sends his foreign minister, Haile Selassie, to send a note to the Italians. But by the time he gets there, the skirmish has already happened and ended, and it's the Italians themselves who are telling him what happened in the result, and it was kind of embarrassing for him. And in the aftermath, there wasn't really much of a response initially. There's a headline in the New York Times on December 8th about the size of a stamp saying that Italy, for the second time, has protested against an Ethiopian attack in Walwal. And the AP Bureau in Rome attributes the facts, though, to the Stefani News Agency, which is a government-controlled agency. So initially, the world just kind of lets out a really loud yawn, but this will serve as a pretext, much in the same way that the Japanese used a similar kind of attack incident to justify invading Manchuria. So the skirmish happens in December of 34, and Haile Selassie, he appeals to the U.S. They don't seem interested at all in getting involved. And he then goes to the League and tries to bring this attention to the League Council and get them involved to talk about it. Anthony Eden, as they say, across the pond, first learned of the incident from his French counterpart, the French delegate to the League. The Frenchman, René Massidlier, wouldn't explain on the phone, but told him that it was important enough for him to come down to the Palais des Nations. This is today the European headquarters for the UN, but at the time, this was the complex where the League of Nations was housed. And the thing to know about that, the League is a very different organization from the UN. It has no flag, no symbol, no peacekeeping force, and so really no enforcement power except based on the military strength of its members. And really the two key members that kind of dominate the League Council is Britain and France. Those are the two great powers who are really kind of that the League is relying on to really enforce any decisions that it comes to. It's important to understand, though, too, that it was created as a result of World War I. And after the carnage of modern warfare and how just the size and the scale of the destruction and the lives lost, the League was supposed to was created to try to prevent another world war from happening. And it did this through a mechanism that they called collective security. The idea was that the League was a union of members, and an attack on one member was an attack on all other members, kind of similar to the way NATO works, or financial economic security with the European Union. And the idea was that the retaliation of the whole League, of all the other members, would serve as a deterrent to keep anyone from starting a conflict that could lead to another world war, in the same way that the Serbian conflict led to World War I. And ironically, it was President Woodrow Wilson who kind of spearheaded this organization, and yet Congress wouldn't vote for it. And so the U.S. was never a member. But going back to Eden, he's a rising star in the coalition government in the UK. He was young, in his 30s, a bit of a fashion icon. He was known for his fancy suits and his signature Hamburg hat. And, British politics at the time was so inbred and insular that the second time he runs for office, his opponent is his sister's mother-in-law. So that kind of shows you how small this circle is. But the 1930s were a time of wars and rumors of wars. Eden fought in the Great War and found out in March of 1935 at a state dinner that he and Adolf Hitler were actually on opposite lines of a battle. And during the dinner, they mapped out where the battle happened on the back of a dinner card, which Eden kept as a souvenir. Since he spoke several languages, including Persian, Arabic, French, German, and Russian, he was a natural pick to be Britain's delegate to the League of Nations. So when he arrives at the headquarters after his French counterpart calls him, he gets a quick briefing from Ethiopia's representative, Tekle Hawariat Tekle Mariam. And René, the French counterpart, says, "It smells bad to me, like Manchuria." And Eden, of course, gets the reference because something similar happened there, where the Japanese had used the pretext of a blown up railway to invade the Chinese province. The League tried to broker a ceasefire there, but it was humiliating for China, and something similar would happen with Ethiopia. The kind of amusingly sad or sadly amusing thing about this incident in the aftermath is that the reporters dig into the kind of back and forth between the Italians and the Ethiopians. The emperor sends a telegram to the League, lays out the situation and what he's asking for. And the Italians really fervently reject and push back on the claims that he made in the telegram, especially about where Walwal stood geographically. The reporters then really start to dig into this, and they look at a map finally about 4 days later that is produced by the Italian Geographical Institute in Bergamo. And when they looked at the map, there it was. There was Walwal, just like in the map that I showed you, 62 miles inside the Ethiopian border, according to a treaty in 1897. Well, Italy's man in Geneva, where the League was headquartered, Baron Pompeo Aloisi, finds out about this hanging indictment, and he demands that it's taken down. And plus, he also said that there were changes made in 1908 and that the map was out of date. So the reporters go to the north wing of the Secretariat building, which is where the League library was housed. And they start going through that, and they find another map of Ethiopia. This one issued by the Italian Colonial Office. And when they took a look at it, there again, Walwal sits 62 miles within the Ethiopian border. And this map was made in 1925. But it didn't really matter, right? Mussolini was the new Caesar, and he wasn't going to let his ambitions, his ambitions didn't care about anyone's facts. This is probably a pretty grand example of, my feelings don't care about your facts. He was on a mission, and as the reporter David Dara wrote and shared, he thinks that the Italian plans for an invasion probably began as early as 1932. So this was already baked into the cake. And so the skirmish then ends, as I said, with a really loud yawn. The world doesn't really take note, but this does start a diplomatic crisis that will grow in time. It spills over into 1935, and for the better part of that year, this crisis just intensifies, and then it moves towards the front page above the fold, and it becomes the story of the year, basically in 1935. And it's the one thing that the whole world is aware of and is paying attention to. And so this would eventually lead to the invasion that would happen later, almost about a year later. So that's a little bit on the history of Walwal and the skirmish, and hope you enjoy that. And thanks for hanging with me through this.